My name is Saskia. I've got over a decade of experience in running a small business in the needlecraft industry. I'm obsessed with the healing magic of crafting and the power of community. Dreaming big about a world where we rely on value-based businesses, the kindness economy, and where we can fully say, fuck fast fashion. A Smaller Life aims to inspire you to look at your wardrobe differently. Where do you buy? How do you use your clothes? And can you make some of it yourself? We learn from experts in the needlecraft, textile, and creative industry, big names and small, about what it's actually like to run a small business. I'm educated in marketing and photography and learned to do everything else on the job. Selling, pattern and product design, teaching, and running a needlecraft school. As a small business owner, you're in charge of everything. Branding, marketing, selling, promoting, and cleaning the loo. Emotional talks with sellers about wins and woes, product and design, conscious decision making, why we do it, how we do it, and what we need to become the future of fashion without burning the hell out. And I'm determined to lift our scene up for the world to notice so they can step away from fast fashion. This time, we are talking to Elizabeth Joy. Elizabeth is the founder and editor of the mindful media site, Conscious Life and Style, the host of the Conscious Style podcast, and the content creator behind Conscious Style on Instagram. Elizabeth also manages the Conscious Fashion Collective platform. So, lots of consciousness right there. I wanted to talk to Elizabeth about all the terms we use in our space of conscious fashion and in the textile industry. So she will get into what certain words mean and what they're used for, and if the meaning is used in different ways. We also talk about content creation and values and the complexities of running a value-based business. The podcast and the other platforms that Elizabeth hosts have so much valuable information. You could look at it this way, where Elizabeth focuses on education, on conscious fashion. I am more focused on the creating part, the making, the craft side of it. Her podcast is such a great way to do a little bit of investigating and researching what it all means and what's important. So her first few episodes really dive deeper into explaining the terms used in our conscious industry. And if you subscribe to her newsletter, you get this whole list of resources. It's amazing. So she'll mention that at the end. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy my conversation with Elizabeth Joy. Welcome, Elizabeth. I'm so glad you are here talking to me in the podcast.
I'm super excited to be here and be on your show, Saskia. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
I can't wait because we have talked a little bit before, and I'm positive that you are going to teach me so much again this time. You are like a vessel of information, and I can't wait to start. So
thank you.
You're welcome. I first wanted to ask you, what are you wearing? Could you tell us a little bit about your outfit?
Yeah. So I'm wearing a people tree dress. It's like blue and white. It kind of reminds me of like the Grecian islands. You know, I'm mentally escaping there with this dress. And I think I got it like 4 or 5 years ago, I believe. It was part of like a partnership that I was doing with my blog, and I got it gifted, and I've just loved this piece. It's like a house dress, just super comfy. I look put together with like one piece, super simple. And I'm barefoot, but I would wear these sandals from this brand, Salt and Umber, that I have that are like raffia. And they're also like super comfy and summery. And I would probably wear some jewelry from Swap Society as well. I It's like a US based swapping platform where you send in your jewelry and clothes that you no longer want and then like get points to get other people's secondhand clothing and jewelry. So I've
I
been
love
having
that.
yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with it, especially with jewelry because I never buy jewelry. So it's been really fun. It's all point. You can swap a jacket that you have for jewelry. So like you can get totally different
Huh.
items if you have too much of one thing, not enough of another. It's really fun.
Oh, that is very interesting. I'm definitely going to explore that and see if there's a version of it in Europe. I can research and we can share in the show notes. That
Yeah.
sounds a lot like a lot of fun. And it's also really cool if you have like this one piece item that you're completely put together. In Holland, you would not be able to do that throughout the year because we have seasons. But I do love the style. And I complimented you on your outfit and then thought of this question. So in all fairness, I could also share what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
And as you are wearing a People Tree outfit, which is a conscious clothing brand, right? They make sure they do fair payments and they do the things that we love brands to do in fashion. I am going to tell you what I'm wearing. Okay, I'm looking down. I'm wearing leggings. Cornwall, which is a UK-based business. Actually, also my t-shirt is from the same brand. I bought them because they do plus size. The cotton is organic cotton and the shipping is done from the UK. I'm not completely positive where everything is made, but it checked quite a few of my boxes, my personal values, so that was good. But
Mhm.
in all transparency, I'm also wearing Levi's jeans skirt, which I know on the scale of sustainability and conscious points wouldn't score very high, but I bought it because they did have the plus size range. And this is an item that was completely missing from my wardrobe. I can wear it with almost anything. It is kind of like a style staple. This will last me
Yeah.
for ages. So that was my thinking in that it was okay for me to get it rather than
Yeah.
buying 3 or 4 different skirts.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I love this concept of conscious fashion, conscious style. It's about being intentional. It doesn't always have to be from the most perfect brand, but it's about doing the best that we can with what we have available to us and with what works for our lifestyles and our bodies and all that stuff. So it's not about like making the most perfect, 100% sustainable choice, but a really thoughtful, conscious one, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It would be so tiring. It would burn us out, right? If we have to
Mm-hmm.
do everything right. That's not the idea. It's kind of like get your information. And if you can get your information in a fun and easy way, like listening to podcasts or reading blogs, that would make it kind of more of a fun journey or adventure. And I love pointing out that there's not that heavy you have to vibe around it. Like a lot of people, when I meet them and when I talk to them and I'm going on about sustainability and consciousness, and they're like, oh, they're getting all nervous and they try to explain why they are not wearing something like that or why they have this certain knitting project. And I'm always like, no, 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 please. It's not about being sustainable angels or something. It's about being conscious. And so conscious is in the title of your brand, the Conscious Life and Style
Mm.
website, the Conscious Style podcast. Do you feel like it's getting to be like a buzzword and it's losing its meaning a little bit? Hello, friends. I just want to say something to you quickly. So, if you're liking the podcast, if you're liking what I'm talking about, consider joining the mailing list. I have bi-weekly updates on the podcast and or business insights and tips. The occasional exercise to get you ahead. If you want to actually talk to other business owners about the things that I talk about here on the podcast, why not become a Yavol community member for as little as €8.50 a month? That's like buying me coffee and a croissant. But don't do it for me though. Do it for yourself, because I promise that you will get something out of it, either the emails and or the community. So you can either go to the show notes or sign up through yavol.myflowdesk.com/pattern shift. I hope you'll join us.
Yeah, I mean, I think all these words are, they're in the community and they're maybe authentically used for a couple of years and then they're sort of co-opted by the bigger fashion industry. I mean, I think every word is, sustainable fashion was conscious fashion, thinking of a certain fast fashion brands, more eco collection that they call the conscious collection. Circular fashion has definitely been greenwashed and co-opted in the past couple of years. Even regenerative fashion has been sort of greenwashed, which is kind of sad. And also, I would even say ethical fashion has been, especially when I think about we'll get into what all these terms mean, or my take on what these terms mean. But, we see brands calling a vegan plastic bag ethical. Okay. So it wasn't made from animal skin, but is virgin synthetic plastic material. Is that really ethical when we're in a climate crisis? So the latest term I've heard is responsible fashion, but I think that term is going to be greenwashed too. We just have to, my take on it is that none of these words are going to stay perfect or stay great. It's just, I think it's sort of about defining them and educating people and what they really mean, so that when these big fashion brands use the terms, we can identify and be like, oh, it's not really sustainable. It's not really conscious. Just because they're saying it is doesn't mean that it is. Because we always are finding a new word, but the second we find another word, the industry is co-opting it. So yeah, it's hard.
And so, what you're saying about education, I think that people in general in the field of, at least in the field of crafting, but I also think fashion in general, people really get their information about sustainability mostly from the brands themselves. And that gives them such a watered down definition of what things actually are and what they mean. That is what I think is happening. Lots of people think, why should I educate myself? I already know that I should do this or this or this, but then they don't realize that most of that information and most of that knowledge comes directly from the marketing team of the brands. This is actually the biggest reason that I wanted to talk to you. Your podcast and your platform and your website is kind of hovering over what I do. It's like the top of you trickle down into the part where you make your own clothes, which is what I'm focusing on. But you spend a lot of energy and effort on educating people about this industry, the fashion industry, and the dark side of the industry, but also how to focus on going into the good side. So could you talk to us a little bit about those words and your idea of them and what they mean to you?
Yeah, I'm totally with you that I think a lot of the confusion comes from that. A lot of the so-called education right now is coming from the brands because they're the ones with the money. And it really frustrates me as somebody who's been, I've had this website, I've been doing this for 6 years, and I'm not even, one of the first. Of course, there's people who have been doing it much longer. And then I see that when you search a term like ethical fashion, a term like sustainable fashion, you see the Google ads of brands that are totally not sustainable. It's really frustrating, right? They have the money, they have the budget to sort of greenwash their way to sustainability, which it feels like we're up against a lot. But yeah, I just really think it's important to educate and try to educate as many people who will listen and who are curious. But yeah, so I guess I'll start with ethical fashion because that's sort of how I got my way into this movement. And I feel like it's something that's really important to me. So ethical is, our morality, right? It can be subjective. It can be sort of like what we value, So this term can be the sort of ambiguous because, is it locally made or is it fair trade from another country? Is it responsibly sourced, regeneratively raised, wool sweater, or is it a vegan organic cotton sweater? It might depend on your values, but I try to keep in mind what I learned in philosophy class that, the golden rule of moral philosophy is do unto others as you would like done unto you. Would you want to work in the conditions that the makers are working in to make your outfit? And I think that will tell you if it's an ethical piece, right? Would you want to work in the factory where your shoes were made? Would you want to work there every day for the rest of your life? Would you want your child, your daughter, your mother, whoever? I think that tells you a lot. And then like the platinum rule of moral philosophy is even stronger, right? Like do unto others as if they want to be treated by you. And I think, are they happy there? Do they want to be working, 80 hours in sweatshop-like conditions? No. And I think that there's this idea that people from the global South in these countries are like so grateful for these jobs that they're like happy with these poor conditions. And it's just so dehumanizing. Nobody deserves to be in that, even if that's their only option. That's not right. That's their only option. So there's a lot to think about there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just recently learned, and maybe I'm a little bit like blushing saying that it's been recent, but there's so much to learn. Every day I see new things, I read new things. As a non-native English speaker, I didn't realize the difference between a minimum wage and a
living wage.
And in some countries, it's like 3 times the minimum wage is only barely making a living wage. And that was a big aha moment for me.
Yeah. Living wage is such a big topic within ethical fashion. I think that's sort of the core demand of all, the advocacy organizations, garment makers, labor organizers. It's the wages. These brands can say that they're having all these empowerment programs and this and that training. And at the end of the day, what are the workers demanding? Higher wages, living wages. If a brand is not talking about wages, then their claims on ethics are sort of ethics washing or fair washing or greenwashing or whatever you want to call it. So that's what I would say in terms of what to look out for. I would say, is the brand talking about wages, whether they're publishing the actual wages like Nisolo does, or which is an American brand. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with them. Or are they, saying we pay triple the minimum wage or we pay double the average wage, something specific and like tangible like that, I think is good to look for.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So that's ethical as a term. And I think whenever you see ethical, you have to stop and take a moment and think about how they use it, what the context is, and then decide what you think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. So what are typically other terms that we hear in the field of fashion and textile industry?
Yeah, I think that probably the biggest one is sustainable fashion. And the reason I started with ethical fashion is because I believe that sustainable fashion is sort of a combination of like eco fashion, like ecologically responsible fashion, eco-friendly fashion, environmentally aware, and ethical fashion. Like to me, sustainable fashion has to be about planet and people and, all the living things that are with us on the planet. So yeah, sustainable fashion is really used a lot. We see it used by fast fashion brands when they use 20% recycled material or whatever in their garments. But really sustainable fashion to me is ideally the most holistic term that we can use, because it's are we operating in a way that this could be sustained forever? And I think achieving sustainable fashion and is sort of pretty much impossible in our, current system. But I think that if we view it sort of as a verb, we're working towards it. We're trying to become more sustainable. I think that is such an incredible goal. Are we using natural fibers? Are we using, plant-based dyes? Are we really making high quality? Because it doesn't matter what material you're using if that garment was designed to fall apart after 2 wears. That can't be really sustainable, which is why I would say fast fashion brands really can't call themselves sustainable, because they're reliant on overproduction and overconsumption, and the scale that they operate on can't be sustained.
Right.
H&M makes 3 billion garments per year. And, who knows how many Shein makes. They don't publish that data, but I'm sure it's even more. Could you really produce that every year and we could still have a livable planet? Probably not. So
no. I talked to Zoe Edwards of the Check Your Thread podcast a while back. And I know what she would say. She would say never use sustainable, but always put more sustainable. So she we check in with each other and she corrects me all the time. She goes no, it's not sustainable, it's more sustainable. It's something that we try, because the most sustainable action you can take is to stop breathing. There's some Dutch humor for you right there. Yeah. So that's sustainability. And how about circular?
Yeah, that's a term that's gotten really popular in the past couple of years. So I sort of have this 4-step framework to circular fashion that I sort of made based on research that I did on this topic. So I'll just sort of list out the 4 steps that I see, because circular fashion is, a circle. There's a lot of steps along the way, but it basically, in a sentence, I see it as a system that doesn't produce waste, and also there is no real end of life. So, first of all, the first step of the 4 I would say is we're producing and consuming less. So as I was talking with sustainable fashion, there becomes a point where the scale is not sustainable. The scale is not circular. What possibly could we do with these 150 billion garments, being produced per year? It's too much to try to keep into a circular system. And then the second step I would say is design out waste and design with the end in mind. So that starts with the designer thinking, okay, how can I reuse existing textiles, or make sure that I'm using every piece part of the fabric when I'm developing my dress, and also not polluting. So I think that this is why I see recycled synthetics as not, they might be a stopgap solution, a little bit better for the time being, but in the long term, I don't think that synthetics can be part of a truly circular system, because at the end of the day, they're still polluting, and pollution is waste.
Yeah.
So the fabric we might not be wasting the fabric, or, we're using these recycled plastic bottles or whatever, but we're still shedding microplastics along the way, polluting waterways, polluting the air. So is it really circular when plastic is involved? But for the time being, okay, maybe we have to work with what we have. So yeah. And then sort of the second part of step 2 is design with the end in mind. So are you either designing that garment to be recyclable, repairable, resellable, and or compostable. So, what is the end of life of that garment? What is the plan when that person is done wearing it?
Yeah.
And then the third step is to extend a garment's life as long as possible. So this is sort of where the everyday individual comes in. We can rewear what we have as much as possible. If it no longer suits us or fits us, we can swap it, we can sell it, we can loan it out. There's like these peer-to-peer rental apps now. So you can like rent out your closet, which is really cool. And from a brand side, also, are they offering repair programs? Are they offering resale programs and that kind of stuff? And then the fourth step is, how are we managing that piece's quote unquote end of life? So as I said, I think a circular system, there is no end, right? A circle doesn't have an end.
Right.
So how are we regenerating it in a way? So like if it's compostable, it's sort of returning to the soil and helping, if it was made with like organic, healthy dyes and fabrics, it's maybe, helping replenish nutrients in the soil. Or, is it totally deconstructible so that it can be turned into something new? Can we sort of like turn it into something else and upcycle it? So, and then the system starts all over again, right? So once we've like upcycled it maybe into a new garment, then now we extend that life again. Yes. And it kind of like goes round and round.
Yeah. And we're talking about the circle from the perspective of a designer of a brand, but you can look at that as a consumer as well, I think.
Yeah.
Whenever you make or buy a new item, knowing what the mix of fibers is and knowing if it can be composted or not, just having that kind of information really helps to make better decisions. Just a practical example, if we talk about jeans, like we know that jeans is one of the worst kinds of fabric you can buy in terms of the amount of water and toxics that I use and all of that. But if you buy stretch jeans, it's even worse because then I think usually it's about 25 to even 30% of fibers that make it stretch. If you were to put your jeans on the ground and wait and see what happens, then there's this skeleton of plastic that will be left after the cotton has vaporized. What's the verb?
Right. The cotton can compost, but then yes, the plastic is sort of left there. Yeah.
So the knowledge about fibers and how things are put together and how you could mend them, like jeans is easy to mend in lots of ways. So just thinking about that can make it more, you can make more circular decisions, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think like a circular system is collaborative. There was one of the founders of the sneaker brand Thousandfell, which is sort of a circular minded sneaker brand. You can take apart the components and remake new sneakers. They have a program for that. But they were saying, an individual brand can't really call themselves fully circular because it involves the whole system. The consumer has to participate in that circular system. The governments have to support recycling infrastructure so that even if a garment is recyclable, is it actually getting recycled?
Exactly. Yeah. I think as consumers, we should sign contracts when we buy something saying, I promise to recycle this by the end of its life in the right way.
Yeah. And Thousandfell has a brilliant system that I would love to just share, and maybe it inspires if there's any other brands out there. And I think it also could be a good system for policymakers too. They have a deposit system. So they say, their sneakers are, I think, $100 plus a $25 deposit. So you're paying $125, but if you give your sneakers back at the end of their life, you get the $25 back. And it's similar to the recycling system in Germany, where you pay 25 cents for the glass bottle or whatever it is, and then you get it back, or 10 cents or
Yeah, that's what we do
So,
in the Netherlands as
oh,
well.
cool.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of a mending service that a brand might have. I think Mud Jeans in the Netherlands, it's a Dutch
Yeah.
brand, I think, does that. And there's so
Nudie
many
jeans.
creative ways, yeah, to do that. Awesome. So that's circular. Any other terms or words or wording you want to
Yeah.
shine a light on?
Yeah, I think one last one, which probably your audience is very familiar with, is slow fashion,
Mm-hmm.
which is, this sort of like this, like, I hesitate to say timeless just because it has this connotation of being boring, but just
Mm.
like it transcends trends and fads and what's in and out and whatever. And you're just focusing on what you find to be beautiful. And you're, just slowing down how we consume and cherish fashion. So just slowing down our consumption. From a brand side, of course, it's producing fewer, better things. But also from, an individual's perspective, it's just caring for what we have. Yeah, mending, repairing it, upcycling it, giving it a good home if it no longer fits you, suits you, and maybe sewing your own clothes and really going through that process, and really just, I think, just slowing down every aspect of the
Of
production
your
and
life.
yeah, right. And I, I think slow fashion has also been starting to be co-opted as well.
Mm.
But I feel like it sort of was like the last one because no fast fashion brand can really say that they're slow. So,
Yeah, maybe we should hang on to that one a little bit more and claim it back.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think and my podcast is called A Smaller Life for a reason. There's a lot of unlearning there, especially for me personally as well. I've had to unlearn a lot of accumulation of things, having the need for things or the apparent need for things, wanting the latest color of nail polish, all of that. I think I'm talked about this yesterday with a friend. I'm Gen Z, I think. No, I'm Generation X. I'm Gen X. Us and the generations after us, at least the two generations after Gen X, are bombarded with lots of things for not a lot of money. And
Mhm.
we're trying to get this movement going, and it's like, oh, I have this image now of a wave crashing on top of us. It's
Yeah.
There's a lot of unlearning to do, and it has to do with ego, it has to do with confidence. If you are confident with yourself as a person, with what you've experienced in life and what you've accomplished in life, then it's a lot easier to get to the point where you are, oh, this is enough actually, or I can now
Mhm.
focus on getting really good items that can last a long time and
Mm.
still be fashionable. I mean, it's nice to, it's easier to have like never
Mhm.
ending timeless piece of fashion. My favorite is the Breton shirt. And as I've said before in the podcast, I've had all these plans of the basic wardrobe, the blue wardrobe, all these plans.
Mhm.
But in real life, I just love color. I love fashion. And I
Yeah.
think there's a way we can do all of it. But it's a lot of learning and unlearning. Do you think for lots of people, this is so overwhelming that they do not even start their journey into conscious fashion?
Yeah, totally. I think there's the overwhelm. And I think, there's these misconceptions about what sustainability is. There's these conflicting messages. And I think the worst is that with brands sort of leading the sustainability conversation because they have the budgets to market to do so, there's this idea that you have to spend a lot of money and you have to buy these certain things, ironically, which aren't even really sustainable. You have to buy all these things to somehow be sustainable. But like, actually, one of the most sustainable things that we can do is just live more simply and Yeah, buy less. Of course, this is not everybody in the world, right? We're
Exactly.
talking
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
largely the global north. Global north, there's a lot of inequality in places like the US
Mm-hmm.
where people still don't have enough and they might not have enough clothes. So I want to acknowledge that. But for those of us who do have enough or too much,
And
perhaps.
still make a difference, this group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, so I recently read the book, The Day the World Stops Shopping by J.B. McKinnon, which I think your audience would love. Yeah. I hope it's available worldwide. It's a Canadian author. He was talking about some research done by, I might be like butchering this name, but Maren Ingrid Kropfeld that looked at like 4 types of people who aren't these quote unquote mainstream consumers to identify what had the biggest impact. And so Maren, studied environmentally conscious consumers. So people buying quote unquote green things, frugals, which are people who take pleasure in saving money, tightwads. So these are people who hate spending money. And then voluntary simplifiers. And the people who are most successful at reducing their impact, like looking at the data, were actually the simplifiers, not the environmentally conscious people who were maybe buying these green products.
Mm.
Like they actually found that the green consumers didn't reduce their impact at all compared to like the mainstream consumer. So that was fascinating.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. As what you said earlier, the idea is not to get rid of everything you have and start shopping green,
Right.
quote unquote. The idea is to kind of stop shopping, use what you have, and every time you need it, and then figure out what it is what is need. Every time you need a new item, then you start thinking about whether you want to swap it or buy it or make it. And the whole process of that is slow in and of itself. What is it that I'm going to need next season so that now I can make a decision? What am I going to do? Am I going to sew it, knit it? Am I going to find it secondhand? And that will take a lot more time than just going online and press buy.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a whole lifestyle change, but
Yeah.
it's fun. And I think lots of people have changed their lifestyle in different ways already. Like they eat differently, they travel differently. And it seems like fashion feels so overwhelming for a lot of people to start changing things. And I think it's up to us, like content makers and podcasters, to make it kind of fun and easy, step in level.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a cultural shift. It's this cultural narrative. Like right now, the sort of societal norm is you're successful if you have these big fancy things, the fancy car, the fancy clothes, the tons of shoes and bags and the manicure, the hairstyle, and it's like this constant sort of like consumption wheel that we're constantly spending money and then we're maybe stuck in a job we hate. And like, I feel like the pandemic was definitely a wake-up call for many people. It sort of like forced us to press pause. It's really unfortunate that it had to be such a brutal and like scary, and there's so much loss, and it was horrible that it had to take that for us to like all take a collective pause. And I wish that we could have sort of taken that reset without there being a pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah,
I think when we have this pause, and it might be also personal, perhaps you just burn out, or you start a family and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm not spending time with my family because I'm stuck on this wheel of buy work, and just constantly, going and sort of stepping out of that and being like, okay, wait, how can I sort of slow down?
Yeah, exactly. So, wow, thank you so much for explaining all these different words and how people can focus on what the brands are actually saying. And if it's true, this will really help to give them some more perspective. But let's now focus in a little bit on you and your work and how you step into the world to talk about this and share your message. What are your platforms and what do you use?
Yeah. So the main platform is the website, consciouslifeandstyle.com. And then I have like my Instagram at Conscious Style. And then last year I started the podcast, Conscious Style Podcast, which is specifically focused on fashion. So the website is like lifestyle and fashion. And then the podcast right now is pretty much exclusively fashion. It might change, but for now, it's all about sustainable fashion or more sustainable fashion.
Well done.
And yeah, then like secondarily also manage the platform Conscious Fashion Collective. So I used to work for Kamea Shane, who ran that platform, who founded that platform. And then, Kamea decided to step back. And so I purchased that platform and also run that as well. So it's all about fashion too.
Cool. So you make a lot of content for the website and for the podcast. You also have a newsletter that is very informational, full of really interesting facts and inspiration. Could you tell us a little bit about the process of the content creation? And as my podcast is also for business owners and people that want to start a movement, why is content creation so important?
Thank you for remembering the newsletter. That's actually one of my favorite things to do every week is put together the conscious edit, as I call it. It's like my second favorite after the podcast. So
yeah, I love it. Everyone subscribe.
Yeah, content creation. So I think that sometimes it can feel maybe like it's not as valuable as perhaps someone who's like researching these things or a policymaker or an activist on the street protesting. I mean, all these things, you can combine these things, right? You can do both. But sometimes I do feel like, does it matter? But then I'll get, comments from people, direct messages on Instagram, emails, and people saying that like, I learned so much from you and you're helping me on my journey. And, I look to your resources to learn about this topic, and it kind of like, okay, it sort of like reconfirms that like this matters, like it is having an impact on people and also can have an impact in the industry. Like I'll hear from students who are studying fashion design or, fashion sustainability, or they're maybe working for a fashion brand, and that content can have an impact on them. So you never know, like the content that you put out there, you never know who that's reaching, and it doesn't have to reach 1 million people. It just has to reach people who, really care about this stuff, because each person, they can impact the company that they're working for. They can impact their whole family. They can impact their whole friend circle. Like you don't, as like one single content creator, whether you're a brand putting out blog posts or you're a blogger, like your post doesn't have to reach everybody. It's just contributing to that ripple effect, that cascade of information. Like you're maybe reaching 100 people, and then those 100 people can tell 5 people close to them. And, it can just all expand from there. You don't have to reach 1 million people to have an impact.
Exactly. Yeah, that's that idea of the ripple effect is why I still do it. Plus, because I really love doing it, but I still feel that from one person to the next, we can still make a difference. And even if it's just a difference for you personally in your life, knowing that you do the best you can is so valuable. I think us makers or content creators or whatever you want to call us, we sometimes struggle with, who am I to share all this information? I'm not a journalist. I'm not a trained journalist, but it's really important. And I think the feedback from the people that listen is so important in just moving us forward. So everybody who's listening, it's really valuable to give feedback to podcasters, bloggers, to everyone that you kind of quote unquote consume their content, because telling us why it's important to you or what you need will help us to create the right content for you. And it's also for us, it's kind of, I think, if I can fill this in, I think it's a mixture of something that comes from our hearts and also because we think there's a need. So it's kind of a weird spot to be in as a maker, that you want to kind of make a living with a mission. What's that like for you? Are there specific things that make it harder to do your work?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that we're up against in this space, and that, basically everything about the mainstream fashion industry feels like we're fighting against this really strong tide. Like we're swimming in the opposite direction of the current. It sometimes feels like that. Yeah, I think that finding your community, actually interacting with people is really important, because it can feel discouraging to see, fast fashion influencers or fast fashion brands with their millions of followers and millions of likes. And but I think that it's really important to just keep in some ways, keep your head down and focus on your work. And in other ways, find your community as well and work with each other and collaborate. And I think that one of the things that I'm trying to also get better at is release this typical business mindset. I have a business degree and I don't know, standard or mainstream or whatever, business mindset in my head that we're competition and that, you're trying to beat each other. And, if we're trying to build a better world, that is not a way to go about it, right? We need collaboration. Just circularity isn't possible unless we all collaborate, because there's many piece parts along the way. Slow fashion, I think, is only possible if we all work together. The real quote unquote competition is fast fashion, right? Not each other, not other makers in the movement, not slow fashion influencers versus slow fashion brands and makers. I think social media breeds a lot of negativity, and we have a negativity bias as humans, and the social media algorithms somehow optimize that. I don't know a better way of saying that. So it can be really draining on social media, but if you can find a community sort of off of social media, even if you, direct message a few people and hey, let's have a chat and really get to know each other. And it is possible to build community on social media, but I think spending too much time on social media can be really discouraging, because for every 10 positive comments, there's a negative comment. And unfortunately, with our negativity bias, that negative comment is going to be circling in our head. It can be very discouraging.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. Yeah. It's really interesting though, because you said you come from a business background, and I'm the opposite. I come from a maker, designer, okay, maybe marketing background.
Yeah.
But lots of people in the craft and needlecraft industry, they come from the passion and sometimes grow that out into a business. And then it goes the other way around. And then at a certain point, they need to become more professional to actually make a difference, to scale, to grow their business and be able to get the movement that they want to start going. So I think it's, as you say, a matter of working together and getting the talent of people that know how to build a business combined with people that know how to lead a mission. And obviously people can have more than one talent, but working together is so much more powerful, and finding each other in community and working on that. And as you say, staying away from that negative spiral, and the choosing is so important. So not go I want this and this and this, but be happy with, and I have a lot to learn there, because I might not be buying lots of clothes and accessories and shoes anymore. I still consume a lot of knowledge, and sometimes I get overwhelmed by my inbox, and I need to choose what is most important and have some focus on where I want to go with that knowledge building. So I think focus, circularity, those are the things working together, staying positive. I think those are the things we need to move forward. Would you agree? Would you have anything to say to the entrepreneur that is listening at this moment?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it. I guess the only maybe one I would add is just balance and, not letting the work consume you, because I think it's always hard for entrepreneurs and people who, own a business. But if you add on top of it that it's a mission-driven business and it's something that you're personally very deeply passionate about, it's easy for it to consume your entire life, because it feels like your life's purpose and your income and just everything is wrapped up in this business. But yeah, that's not healthy.
Yeah. Boundaries.
Yeah.
So you just said that you have a business background. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started all of this and what your plans for the future are?
Yeah. So I started Conscious Life and Style when I was in college. I was actually trying to get an internship at a fair trade fashion brand, and I didn't really have any sort of relevant work to show for it. So I started a blog, started writing about fair trade fashion, and then used that to apply for the job. And then it sort of cascaded from there. I got into the Instagram account and I just became really passionate about it. And yeah, I was getting a business degree at the time. And when I graduated, I worked like a 9-to-5 job for a little bit, but it was really clear that I wanted to work more in this fair and sustainable fashion field. And I started freelancing for brands on the side while also running my blog and working this job, and eventually quit the job, was doing the freelance and the business. And then at the beginning of last year, actually, I went full time with Conscious Life and Style. And so that's sort of where I am now. And this whole past year has been really about expanding the team, adding more writers, podcast editor, partnerships manager who helps me work out the partnerships with brands, pitch brands, respond to pitches, all that stuff, and a virtual assistant. But I don't want to continue at that pace. I feel like sometimes there's this pressure as a business owner that you have to just grow pace. I feel like we've grown to this point where I'm still settling into it. And I do believe in growing slow and mindfully and being just really intentional about where the business is going and not making rash decisions. So I think actually in the near term future, it's going to be more about solidifying the foundations and sort of deepening the things that we're working on rather than expanding and growing, and just developing better partnerships with each of the people that are working on the team and thinking about ways that we can sort of expand our impact with what we have now. And then in the longer term future, of all these ideas to, expand more into video content and more courses and other educational resources and, developing a community and all that kind of stuff. Definitely that's on the horizon. But for now, I think just sort of really strengthening the community that we have, increasing the engagement and, my connection to the audience, the team with each other, and to the business, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds like a great strategy to take it slow and build on what you already have. I feel like I'm doing the same thing. I'm coming from a slightly different angle with the community in place and working on the courses now. There's different ways that you can get to the same point. So what would you say, if you want to share, is your business model? So for me, that is the community and the memberships I offer there. I've reinstalled my Patreon, and that is kind of a way that I'm slowly growing. How do you do it with your podcast? It's a hard way to make a buck, right?
Yeah, it is challenging, and there's no get rich quick scheme.
No, there's not.
Yeah, I think that so basically the three forms of revenue that the business has right now are affiliates. So that's pretty much their website. I really don't share affiliate links on social media. And then secondarily, there's partnerships. So this upcoming, or actually current season, we just started season 4 of the Conscious Style podcast. We do have a sponsor, which is, I'm super grateful for that and excited because it was like a cost for a while. It was just like pure cost. So now we're at least like covering the expenses, still not really making money with the podcast, but it's a passion project. And that's part of growing slow, is that it does take time to like develop that income. And then the third is like ad revenue on the website. So like the display ads, and it's not my favorite. There's ads that show up for fast fashion brands, and I wish I could, I don't have any control over those ads, which is really hard as like a conscious creator, but I don't want to take outside funding. And although these aren't ads that I believe in, I feel like I sort of wrestle with that. Okay, like I'd rather that than go into debt or sort of give up ownership of my business, if that makes sense. And take a loan, or someone has some sort of piece of the business. Like I want it to be 100% owned, and I can turn off these ads anytime I want, hopefully next year, as we're developing some of these other things, maybe like a course or other digital products, community, whatever it ends up being, hopefully that I can like kind of turn off those ads in the next year or so. And it's not a forever thing. It's just sort of like getting us through this time right now.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those challenges you have as a value-based business, that it's a lot harder to find like funding, or do you work with ads? Do you work with sponsors? Who are those sponsors? When there's things I struggle with a lot, like ideally, I would love it if every listener would be either a member of the community or a Patreon, because then they would fund what I'm doing. That would be ideal. Then I would never have to make those decisions. So that is my goal, to get to a point where that is enough. And again, what do you need? I don't need much. I need to feel valued in a way that people think that it's valuable, the content that I'm creating is valuable to them. It really helps if they can support that with, I don't know, a few euros or dollars or whatever it is per month. That would be ideal. But there's still a lot of work for us to do. And it's at least, a lot of the time it goes to a full-time business. And you just said for you, it's full-time. For me, it's part-time, but a lot of part-time. So it's definitely all those decisions that you have to make that are in line with your values, and sometimes like just touching your values, and then just for the time being, and then we're wanting to do different things. And for me, as an example, I really love to be super transparent about these things, because that makes it really clear to listeners what it's about. For example, I had to stop the account I paid for to do the transcriptions for my website. At a certain point, I was like, okay, I need to take away every cost that is not absolutely necessary. And then I said on my Patreon, as soon as I have this many people, I will start paying for it again, and that will make the podcast more inclusive. But that kind of struggles with my values. I wanted to be inclusive from the get-go, right? So now I'm kind of doing this in-between thing where I found a service that does it and that had a really good deal. So I'm not at the Patreon level yet, but I just went ahead and took the deal, and I'm kind of hoping that we'll get to that Patreon level soon. But that's what it's like, isn't it, in real life?
Yeah, definitely. There's these decisions all the time. Like, do we do that? Or, okay, what would that sacrifice? Constant decisions. And I have a lot of respect for people who are like community supported shows, community supported content creators, because that is a lot of work. It's definitely slow growth and very challenging. I haven't gone that path myself. I mean, perhaps with like some sort of community, that's something out in the future. But I used to be a freelancer working for content creators, and I saw how hard it was. And I think that influenced my decision that I wanted to maybe make the leap from my full-time job, my 9-to-5 job, to the content creator faster than that. And, you know, we all make these decisions and there's pros and cons to all of it. And the sponsored content is, in the beginning, it was not, I believed in the brands, but it's not the most fun content to create. And is it the most educational? I try to make it as educational as possible, but is it like the most educational, the most interesting, the most inspirational? You know, I don't know. Now I am really lucky that now the platform has grown. I have so much more leeway or like ability to sort of be picky, I guess, and only work with people that I'm like really like, okay, this is offering something different and I can really educate my audience with content for this brand. Yeah. I won't go on and on about that, but
we'll come back to that another time.
Yes. Yeah. So you're coming on to the Conscious Style podcast. So maybe we can talk more about the struggles of being a mission-driven business there.
Elizabeth, you've been so generous with your information. We've learned so much. I mean, I've learned so much, and I'm sure the audience has as well, of the fashion industry in general, but also what it's like to be a content creator in a value-based business. I think we covered all the different layers.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and your inspiring information.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on. This was such a joy. The hour just like flew by. I can't believe this was
I know. Oh, and where can people find you?
Yeah. So the main place is consciouslifeandstyle.com, Instagram at Conscious Style. The podcast is Conscious Style Podcast. And then, as you mentioned, the newsletter, you can subscribe to that at consciouslifeandstyle.com/subscribe.
A Smaller Life is Jawohl's completely free way for makers and sellers to learn how to be part of a healthier take on clothes and fashion. Jawohl offers an online community where they can connect and inspire each other, monthly topics with challenges for makers, and coaching and support for sellers. We will move the needle. For more information, go to ja-wol.com. Jawohl!